So, in this video, I want to talk about Khaenri'ah, with focus on Rerir, Tholindis, and the Cataclysm. Well, the last two acts of the Nod-Krai Archon Quest have been heavily centered around Khaenri'ah and the events that happened 5 centuries ago. A lot of the information that was presented during the quest was already known to us in form of lore, but there was surprisingly a lot of new stuff as well. First, before I start talking about the lore, there is a disclaimer. This video will obviously contain spoilers, mainly for the Acts 3 and 4 of Nod-Krai Archon Quest. I won't be talking about everything that happened during the quest, and this is not really a recap of the whole Archon Quest, so I try to focus on the important or interesting lore pieces that are relevant to the events that transpired in the quests. Well, I would start talking about Rerir here, but I think that it's best to establish the basic information we already know about Khaenri'ah, just so it all makes sense later. As you probably already know, Khaenri'ah was a nation located underground near Sumeru. It was established around the time when the ancient civilization of Tholindis was being destroyed, so that was around the time after the Great War of Vengeance between the dragons led by Nibelung and the Heavenly Principles ended. So even though Khaenri'ah may sound like a truly ancient nation, it wasn't among the truly ancient civilizations of Teyvat like Hyperborea and Kanomia or Tholindis. Its architecture suggests that it may have been built on ruins of some previous civilization as well, but that's just speculation. Anyway, Khaenri'ah had two dynasties that we know of. The first one was the Crimson Moon dynasty, which, as you may have already guessed, worshipped the Crimson Moon. They say that this era was heavily centered around alchemy. Then one day, for currently unknown reasons, the Crimson Moon dynasty was eclipsed and replaced, which is also why the next dynasty was called the Eclipse, or sometimes the Dark Sun. This dynasty is best known for their usage of abyssal power and very advanced machines. Unfortunately, the Eclipse dynasty was the last one, since at a certain point in time, the Winster King, also called King Irmin, decided to gouge out the eyes of Tholindis, the visionary, who warned him that the path he follows is wrong, which led Dainsleif, his younger brother, to gather a group that went to fight the mad Winster King and free Tholindis. However, the Winster King finally finished his plans to harness immense amounts of abyssal power, using the Traveler's sibling as the conduit. During this event, the people later known as the Five Sinners stole this world-shattering power and divided it among themselves, becoming transcendent beings capable of destroying entire worlds. This was the event that eventually led to the Cataclysm that destroyed Khaenri'ah and brought tragedy across all of Teyvat. As the Cataclysm was happening, none of the Five Sinners went to help Khaenri'ah, and in the end, it was destroyed both by the Abyss and the gods who went there to stop the Cataclysm. Just so you know, all of this was information we already knew about Khaenri'ah, even before the new Archon Quest released. But with all of that out of the way, let's start talking about Rerir, the Rerir of Tholindis. As we witnessed during the Archon Quest, he was a secret agent working for the Winster King. Eventually, his main duty was to find and exterminate the Crimson Moon dynasty's remaining followers and descendants. This is also the reason behind his title, since Rerir of Tholindis means something like Ravager of the Moon, and since his job was to hunt down the remnants of the Crimson Moon dynasty, I would say that it's a pretty fitting title. Though it may seem that way, he wasn't the one personally killing all of these people, as while he still did do that as well, his main purpose was to find information about them and locate them. As we all saw, he was deeply in love with a girl called Tholindis, who was a researcher at the Universitas Magistrorum, which you can basically imagine as something like the Academia of Khaenri'ah. She was studying the shattered Crimson Moon and discovered some potentially important secrets about it. She was also one of the descendants of the Crimson Moon bloodline, which he hid pretty well from Rerir, the same way he hid his real job from her. One day, Rerir met with Dainsleif and his brother Tholindis, who made Rerir doubt his decisions. It's clear that he had many doubts about his job and his whole life. One day, he discovered that Tholindis was on the list of people that were supposed to be disposed of, thanks to her Crimson Moon bloodline. Since then, he decided to help escape the ones he was supposed to hunt down, but unfortunately, at some point, Dainsleif invited him to join his group, which had the goal of saving Tholindis and rescuing him out of prison. This group consisted of the alchemist Gold Rhinotter, president of the Universitas Magistrorum the Wise, Hrobtatyr, a well-known warrior the Foul, Surtalogy, and also Twilight Sword Dainsleif with Rerir. However, as the group stormed the palace and Rerir went to free Tholindis, he learned that Tholindis was in danger in the Universitas Magistrorum and went there to save her. Unfortunately for him, she seemingly misunderstood and thought that he came there at the king's orders to take care of her. So she decided to jump into the Moon Gate, which supposedly killed her, but we can't be sure of that. Anyway, after this, the voice of the Abyss spoke to him, and so he went to the palace where the rest of the group was supposed to confront the Winster King. There he betrayed Dainsleif as well, decided to join the other four, and stole a part of the abyssal power released by King Irmin, becoming one of the Five Sinners of Khaenri'ah. The last part of his memory we see is him jumping into the Moon Gate, which was supposedly the reason behind his body being torn to pieces. It seems like this whole time he has been trying to collect the fragments of his body, which caused the Wild Hunt phenomenon, and then finally go to find Tholindis. Now that I have more or less recapped what happened in the Archon Quest with Rerir, let's talk about some interesting lore bits. The voice of the Abyss that I already mentioned seemed to be also the voice of Tholindis, but the Archon Quest made it pretty clear, as Rerir was rescuing Tholindis from prison, he definitely wasn't the one who spoke in his mind. To me, it seems like the one who was speaking to him and leading him to become one of the 5 sinners was Tholindis from the future. We know that Tholindis has transcendent powers and that the Abyss can corrupt even the passage of time. We also know that each of the 5 sinners correspond to the 4 shades and the primordial one. Tholindis corresponds to Istaroth and the power over time, which means that it seems pretty reasonable to me to assume that he has the power to influence the past. And since we've seen him also influence Clothar to found the Abyss Order, I think it's pretty likely that it was indeed him from the future trying to make sure Rerir becomes one of the sinners. It also sounded like he tried to convince his past self because he said that he heard the voices as well, and maybe he spoke to all of the sinners at some point. By the way, I just thought that I would mention the fact that at some point in time, Tholindis gave Dainsleif a ring that allows him to better retain his memories and to overall suffer less from the erosion that comes in time with the Cross of Immortality. We first heard of this in Sumeru, but it was recently mentioned in Natlan as well, so I think it could be relevant in the future. So we already knew that the last king of Khaenri'ah was the one-eyed Winster king, aka King Irmin. He is said to have gone mad after researching abyssal power for a long time. It seems that he was supposed to lead Khaenri'ah to a new age using this new power source from the Abyss, which they previously only accessed through the Crimson Moon as far as we know. But he eventually became obsessed with the Abyss and decided that he will trick the Tarvaeus sibling and use him to harness great amounts of abyssal power. What's interesting is that at a certain point in the Archon Quest, Rerir straight up called him Irminsul. Well, for a long time, the lore community speculated that there is some sort of connection between King Irmin and Irminsul. The name alone suggests so, but until now I don't think we have seen anyone straight up call him Irminsul. Maybe this is just a mistranslation in the English localization, but it could also be his full name, hard to know. Anyway, assuming it's his full name, there may be even more of a connection between the tree and the King of Khaenri'ah than we previously assumed. Previously it was speculated that he may have been the one who planted the Irminsul tree, or that he was at the very least named after it, both of which may still be true. I personally don't know what this all could imply, and I don't even have an insane theory or something like that. I just have a feeling that this could be very important in the future. Moon gates I mentioned previously are supposed to lead to some mysterious place, maybe even another world, but I would guess that the place they lead to is the moons themselves, because that would make sense to me, considering it's literally called the Moon Gate. It could also just lead to the Moon Marrow, but I guess we'll have to wait to find out, because I doubt that this was the last time we saw Rerir, and I have a feeling that Dottore will be the one to bring him back for some reason, but that's a huge speculation. Well, in the Archon Quest we finally got a confirmation that Arlecchino's eyes are not something unique solely to her, but they are instead a trait shared among the Crimson Moon bloodline. It seems like the eyes, which we usually associate with the pureblood Khaenri'ahs, belong mainly to the Eclipse dynasty, though I can't say that for sure. Speaking of Arlecchino, it was truly amazing to hear Perinheri mentioned in the main story for the first time. It's a book that you can buy in Fontaine that's at this point almost 2 years old, and as was said in the Archon Quest, it's a love story that has very accurate setting in Khaenri'ah. It was very well described in the Archon Quest, and as soon as it released during Fontaine, everyone in the lore community was talking about it, so I don't think I need to add anything about that. In her character story, it's mentioned that she has constant dreams of the Crimson Moon, and that the Pale Moon bloodfire runs through her veins. It was initially Piero, the jester, who recognized her origins when he met her in Snezhnaya for the first time, but even he was surprised to see a living descendant of the Crimson Moon, probably because he thought they were all purged by the Winster King's orders. Regarding Piero, he was a royal mage during the Eclipse dynasty of Khaenri'ah, and during the Archon Quest, we heard some pretty interesting things regarding that from Hrobtatyr, who we heard for the first time here. Anyway, he was talking about how he was appointed as the president and the chief royal mage in the Universitas Magistrorum. And as he was talking about all that, he also mentioned the vice president of the Universitas, called Eftirvit, who was one of the royal mages. I speculate that Eftirvit may have been Piero's real name during the Age of Khaenri'ah, since the description fits. It said that Hrobtatyr was the king's favorite, and he listened to his advice. Piero said that the king and the sages rejected his advices and tore the veil of sin, so I think we actually may have Piero's real name here. After the king and the 5 sinners absorbed the abyssal power, a representative from the Albrich clan would act as a regent and try to lead Khaenri'ah. The one who was chosen at the time of the cataclysm was Anfortas Albrich, the Knight Marshal and the leader of the Schwanenritter Knight Order. Anfortas was declared as martial regent, and he took a big part in rescuing Khaenri'ahs above the ground once the cataclysm struck. An interesting side note at the end, it's unclear whether or not Tholindis was cursed with the curse of immortality, since she wasn't a regular pureblood, but she was of the Crimson Moon bloodline instead, and we don't know if these people were cursed as well. It's possible that she somehow survived to this day, and is still wherever that wound gates leads to. So if you think about it, it's actually possible that we send Rerir to his girlfriend. And before we end, I just wanted to say that I was really happy with how the Archon Quest expanded on the lore and all that, especially the Narsenkreuz mention at the very end by Sandrone, and I overall really liked it. But to me, it seems like everyone around me liked it a bit more than I do, considering I still probably preferred Natlan's Act 4 over Nod-Krai's, but maybe that's really just me. Maybe the nostalgia is already hitting me, even though it hasn't been that long. Anyway, that was all I wanted to say in this video. There's a ton of things to talk about now, since I still haven't covered most of Nod-Krai's lore. I thought about discussing either Sandrone or the history of the Lightkeepers next, but that will have to wait. For now, that will be it, so take care and I see you in the next one.